Welcome to episode 8 of Modular podcast on performing with Modular. As me and Greg don't perform, 1/3 of a performing podcast isn't exactly good for topics of a good few guests. We'll start with us regular faces. Greg, how's it going?
Not too bad, Ben. How are you?
Yeah, good. I've seen your cubic chord videos.
Yeah, really enjoying that. I've gone a bit nuts actually since our last podcast. What modules haven't I got? I think I've maybe picked up 10 or 12 modules since the last time we spoke.
Really?
You've gone chord crazy, haven't you? You've definitely taken it off in that direction.
I've only had it a few days, but yeah, really enjoying it. It's really easy to get something out of it.
You've got it sat next to a Chemy's Castle. Do you have them both in chord mode?
Yeah, I've been using them together, which is a bit nuts.
So is it like the dueling banjos of modular chords?
Yeah. They're so different though. I think I had someone ask me why have I got both, but they're different enough, I think, to have both.
Yeah, that doesn't strike me as being the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, sonically, they're very different, aren't they?
Dirtier, I think.
Which is the dirtier?
Sorry, Ben?
Which one's dirtier?
The Chemis.
Yeah, I think so.
I like quite clean. CV over chord progression is really nice. It's easier with that.
Yeah, musically, the implementation of the cubic goes a lot further.
Yeah.
Well, moving on. Matthew, how are you?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. How are you?
Good. No extra surge. We went through a series of shows where that little shelf was growing.
Yeah, no extra ones. I've calmed down. Just the 3 panels. Say just the 3.
Greg's buying enough for all of us. It's okay.
Oh yeah, exactly. He's definitely doing that.
How's it marrying up with the Octatrack?
Yeah, great. I'm just really sort of, putting tentative sort of forays out into that at the moment. But I want to use those as a system together. I really like how it works. It just really extends the palette of being able to use that as a kind of recording device, and then just keep putting these sounds through it. And yeah, it just works really well. Just through a machine and just sampling stuff from that, and then just keeping it great. It's like playing with like live loops with it. Really, is what I like using it for. Yeah. I'm only just exploring that part of it, but hope to sort of have something to do live with that.
Yeah, cool. And another familiar face from last time, Radek, how are you?
I'm fine, how are you?
Yeah, all good. I don't know if we can see it, but you've a growing buchla.
Yes, it's actually not growing since last time we spoke, but
all right.
Next month I have a couple of modules coming, hopefully.
We'll come on to format later on. New face for us, Scanner. Robin, how's it going?
Very well, thank you. Hello.
What have you been up to?
All kinds of strange adventures. Outside of music today, I drove on a motorway for the first time.
Oh, wow, yeah.
I just learned to drive 2 months ago. So today was the first time I went on the M1 in the UK. So I'm still here. Yeah. So that's a good sign.
Did you actually get any driving done, or were you in a traffic jam?
It was good. I did a test run to Luton Airport and back. So, except I used SatNav for one of the first times, and the lady wanted to take me in a completely different country, I think. It's quite remarkable, and down country lanes that I never thought even existed. I mean, quite an adventure. So I'm happy to be here. I'm safe, and I'm fine. This weekend's been interesting. I had a launch of a house in London that I designed the sound for. So that's been quite a active thing in terms of social networking, people visiting the house and telling me all their feedback about it. So we can talk about that later if you wish, but it's a permanent sound installation in a residence for a family. So it's just been built. So yeah, adventures continue in a good way.
Wow.
Yeah, good. I think we'll segue into installations, get through performances. And final guest, Logan from Logan. How's it going?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, good. Just back from NobCon?
Back from NobCon, survived, and I think I'm not sick, which is fantastic. It's a good time.
So NobCon...
Good time we've had.
Sorry, so NobCon doesn't have the equivalent of the NAMM flu?
Hopefully not. I know a couple of people weren't feeling too well, but all of a sudden like left sick, so that's good.
I heard the Stacey from Hex Inverters hair-filled rubber chicken box. It built a little bit of hay fever and allergy.
Yeah, there was I guess an unknown allergy to hay, and that was entertaining. But I think I saw him probably 8 hours after I heard about the incident, because I think he went up to his room. But chicken coop was fantastic. It was a
it backfired a bit.
Well received.
Yeah, so cool. We'll jump into the topic, performing with Modular. I haven't performed in Modular, so I imagine I'm in a position that a lot of people will be in listening with questions. I know everybody else has. But Greg, I think you're in the same boat as me.
Yeah.
Just a quick one before we get into topic. Are you wanting to perform in Modular, Greg, or not?
Yeah, I did do. I don't know if you remember with the Eurocrack event. Originally, I was due to perform, but it never actually happened, for various reasons. But yeah, I will do eventually. It's kind of the stuff I do with jamming is more or less performing anyway.
So if people don't know, go find Greg on Instagram. Well, everyone here go find on Instagram. But taking the sort of stuff you're doing live, how would you adapt it from a system that's got one patch playing? The videos always sound great, but how would you take that into doing a set, be that short or long? Or
well, what I have the advantage of is a lot of mutes and mixers. I've got tons of them. I've got my BeatStep Pro, which I sync to circadian rhythms, which gives me 16 gates with mutes. And going out from that, I have other stuff that will send gates out as well. So I can send randomness in and fills and different things all over the place. And then I've got mixers as well. My outboard mixer, which I can send mutes on, can fade in with that. I've got aux sends on that for effects as well. So
you feel with all the sort of gate stuff down for the like percussive techno and house, you feel you get a full set out of it.
Yeah. The way I use circadian rhythms is I kind of split it into the first 4 groups and the second 4, and I kind of go between them. I don't have it sequencing through groups on its own.
All right.
Sequence through them manually.
So you can almost queue up your rhythms that you're playing.
That's one thing I do need is something to cue with. I need something like Make Noise Rosie to just kind of have an A/B kind of cue mix.
Well, I work around in terms of the 3 of us that I know haven't performed as much, and then the 3 seasoned veteran guest performers I'll come to in a minute. Matthew, you performed over summer.
Yeah, I did, yeah. In Toronto at the Summer Drift Festival. And I was part of a performance that had 12 sets of musicians. And we were kind of around this auditorium. And there was me and one other person that were using Modular. Lots of other people that had like prepared guitars, and there were some that were just using vocals through sort of large effects chains and things like that. But it was part performance, part endurance test, because it was like a 6-hour continuous piece of music that we did. But yeah, I took a relatively small case with me, and it was a great experience. And I found that basically, even though it was a small case with a relatively small number of modules in, I found a variety and textures that I could actually make with that more than enough for that particular piece. It was like a huge kind of sort of an ambient drift, if you like, with the different sort of sound palettes coming in and out from myself and other people. But basically, I just thought it was a really good way of actually using a modular in this particular context.
Well, I'll pull your system up and talk us through what you took.
Yeah, sure.
Was there any attempt to sync with anyone else? Or
No, not at all. It was all completely free form. We kind of made a list of notes to kind of give to everyone in the performance, but it was more of just as much of things not to do as to do. It was kind of like try and play something that you would play in a minute over 10 minutes, just kind of little kind of cues of what to do with it. But yeah, I found this really worked great. I mean, I had basically like 3 main oscillators there, and I could kind of cue up between each one. I was even just using the Optimix as a queuing mixer as well. So I was kind of having the main signal out to the desk, but then sort of with a banana cable into the other part of the second channel of the Optimix, and then I had that going to my headphones. So I could just bring in another sound, have another one queued up, and then just moving slowly through those. But yeah, just with those oscillators, I had more than enough sort of sonic potential to keep the variety going.
Have you repatched live?
Yeah. I was just repatching live. So yeah, I was kind of using and playing a sound for several, maybe even up to 10 minutes, using a particular motif, and then I would like fade myself out, think of another patch to do, and it really kind of added to the space rather than trying to get all these 12 musicians playing completely at the same time, or all 12 making a noise at the same time. I like the idea that I would play for a while, and then just the mechanics of a modular itself meant that I had to kind of fade back out and repatch, and it wasn't some kind of like big hurry. I mean, I had a notebook with me of some various things I'd put together for ideas, and I'd think, oh yeah, maybe this may fit now. And I'd like that idea that I would then almost like take nearly 5 minutes out to repatch and then bring something else in. And then just that forced discipline of withdrawing from the performance, I think really added sonically to it really. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Hope I can do it again.
You mentioning just taking the 6U case.
Yeah.
It immediately thought of when we interviewed Richard Devine, and we were talking about a sort of HP to time ratios to what, obviously it's different for everyone, but what he felt he could get out 6U or 12U. I notice, certainly I've seen, having the luxury of being close enough to do so, Robin and Radek have taken 6U amongst other bits of stuff. Is that a bit of a magic size, does anyone think?
Just personally for me, I know that I can take that as carry-on luggage, and that was the main kind of deciding fact. I didn't want to throw this in the hole, so it was something I could carry on as carry-on luggage, and that was it. That was the kind of main criteria. So it had to fit within that remit for me.
If it was local or somewhere you're just jumping in your car, would you have taken any more stuff?
That's interesting. I do have another case, and it's only ever so slightly bigger. So probably not, just because this is the only kind of portable one I have. But yeah, the discipline of those kind of things can be really good, I think, of just restrictions. But yeah, maybe so you might get into that thing, the bigger car you have, the bigger case you get into it. But,
what about you, Robin? I've seen, certainly, when I've seen you, it's been a few other tabletop goodies and a 6U case.
Well, it's funny, I mean, just to reference the car for a moment, it's quite interesting. When I put on Facebook the other day, I bought a car, and somebody said for children. I said no, for modular cases.
Yeah.
It has to be big enough to put these things in.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's exactly what you were saying there, which is actually, it's about the practicality. I think for a lot of people, it's the same thing. I mean, without going into my own history, a lot of what I've done is been a fairly kind of, I used to call myself a minimalist anti-hero. So I used to, in the early days, I used to travel, before I was using modular systems, I was traveling with a mixing desk, a small, in fact, I still have it here in the studio, a small Mackie desk, a sampler, a Roland touchscreen keyboard, all kinds of things, but it all used to fit into like a 50 vinyl record box that you could carry onto a plane. It was pretty heavy, but I could physically carry it. And it's always a concern when you're a performing musician, which is that, is that object going to be there if you check it in at the other end, And if it is there, is it still going to function?
Yeah.
But it's a good question to think that, if I'm doing something in the UK, but actually, no, I'm completely with you again, which is, it's about restrictions. Like for me, restrictions can push you in a very different way of thinking. In fact, I reduced myself to a small Pittsburgh case, like a 104 3U Pittsburgh case, to see what that could bring. And actually, that's perfectly functional in a sense. But yes, I also bring other things like a Nord drum. I bring effects, those kind of things, but not other instruments. I try and keep everything in the case, in the box, so to speak, and see what it offers. But we can talk about these kind of things, but it's, as all of us, it's always in a state of flux. It's something that's always changing. And I think the biggest decision for me always is, you have these things behind you. As all of us, I have lots more that you can't see behind, frighteningly behind the screen. And it's deciding what are those instruments you want to use, what voice do you want to present. And, one of the key things about anything you do is finding you, and I think it's one of the key things in anything, whether you're a visual artist, whether you're a writer, it's about finding your voice. And no matter what tools you use, it's about hearing something and saying, hey, that sounds like Greg, or that sounds like Matthew's work, or whoever it may be. And that's really key, I always think, to the success of any creative artist, in a way. So not to wander off around different subjects here, but yes, I've stayed kind of with a 6U case, but traveled with a Nord drum, traveled with a Moog, analog delay pedal, these kinds of things, and keep it in a very fluid, live way.
Is there anything that you feel has to be in there for you to do? I mean, obviously you need some mixing, a VCA, usual utilities. But any real one key piece that you feel enables you to?
Yeah, I think, since I come from a background that used a lot of samplers. So I've been performing for over 25 years live in front of the public. And it's scary to think that. And it's gone through all kinds of different, I remember traveling with a Yamaha SY22 keyboard back in the early 90s. And this was a massive FM keyboard. I had a flight case made for it, and it took 2 of us to carry it, which meant to play a gig in Vienna, meant a taxi to the airport, and so on. So, over time, it became a kind of a mixture of sample-based and live work. And since the invention of things like the music thing, radio music, how do you call it? Is it music thing?
Yeah. Radio music.
Such a difficult name. And with the qubit wave, actually, for me, they're 2 key things that will sit in my case now permanently, probably, because they offer a way for me to draw in a pool of sound that my ear is familiar with, but I can process it live in all kinds of ways. I can play with pitch change, I can throw LFOs, and I can do all kinds of wild and wonderful things with them. But I know I can at least rely on something in the system. So when all goes wrong, I can at least have some other strange texture happening. So the sampling things have been quite a big step for me in a way, quite a valuable way of continuing my voice, in a sense, the creative voice that one has. Oscillators, VCOs are always changing, whatever they may be, whether it's a noise engineering one or a Verbos. I really do change it all the time. I've never, ever had the same setup when I performed. For me, that's always been the appeal of a modular setup, actually, was the flexibility and the kind of rubbery nature of these machines. As you say, there's always an IntelliGel mixer I have. That's always sitting in the case. There's always something like the abstract, what's it called? The abstract...
Opto controller.
Yeah, the opto controller pretty much sits there permanently in the case since that came out. And that's what's so great. Is you can look at a year back and think this thing will always stay with me. And as Greg has testified, the next week you found this other thing that's even better. It's even more exciting. And for me, that's really one of the joys, actually. It doesn't remain a static thing. Whether you're working in the studio, whether you're performing, there's always a sense of fluidity around it. And for me, that's really a joy. And when, the other day I picked up the new, mutable ears, just to be able to play with that immediately and just throw something together in an hour and see what comes out. For me, there's something so much more exciting than new software coming out, even though I still love software, It's largely because I've spent a large part of my life, as most people have today, looking at screens and seeing your world through something ever more these days that size. And it's wonderful to escape that and actually work with something that's only about your ears. It's a joy to work with something that's about listening, and to me, that's one of the real pleasures of it. I notice when I work on film soundtracks or in collaboration with video artists, we sit there and we do this and we watch the timeline of the work. And you're watching a linear timeline and it's actually clocking the time in front of you on any kind of door, whether it be Logic or Ableton. And for me, I'm so happy to move away from that, to move away from that. It's not rigid because you don't have to use it in that way. But there's a tendency to watch sound on screen. Yeah. And for me, It's not about that, and it's about that incredible moment, even with a 3U case of the tiniest detail and everything changing, and the potential of everything disappearing, as has happened to all of us. Whether in the studio, you can write things down in a notebook, and you just know that you can go back and try and set those things, and you go, it doesn't sound anything like that. And I think I've only ever written down 2 patches. I tried doing it with my buchla, and it was so complicated. I just thought, no, let's just have fun with it. Life's too short. Let's enjoy it.
I do like that to make the distinction as well. Like, just looking around the screens here, we've all got kind of big studio modular pieces, as it were. And I like that thing of big. When you're in the studio, you do need different things at hand. There's a vast palette that you may need to recall for a particular project or do something like that. But what I do like about putting something in a 6U or even smaller case is that you've made these kind of decisions about a piece, and you think, well, I'd like to maybe try this, or I'm going to take this module because I've never really used it or used it to its potential. And then you've kind of put these together, and then you've made those, rather than a studio piece of equipment, you've made those into an instrument. And it's a transitory instrument. It's not like a violin or a guitar. It's like you just said earlier, Robin, it's like in a state of flux is this instrument. But you just decided for that moment in time to encapsulate it in a small case and go, right, let's take this out and see what this can do. You can't go back and go, oh, I just want another LFO, or I just want that. You can't do it. It's there, it's fixed. But for that moment in time, it's fixed. And then I really like that discipline of that, doing that.
Well, I like doing that even in the studio. I mean, I set this up to do the video that some might have seen. I don't think I'd get much time out of it for the music I might want to perform, but in collaboration, this is an interactive with the arcade button and the ears, contact mic and elements. The one-U stuff's great for utilities. I feel in part of an ensemble it could offer a lot.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could do something with it live, but maybe the length of time or maybe the style of music I might want to do. The demo case there, that again, I put a video up about that. I set that up with the intention of it's got a synth voice, it's got some super basic drums, a divider, and some utilities. And anything new, for the purpose of not moving everything else that you can see has got holes in it all the time for demos. But I thought if I just set 6U, and I guess that magic 6U number, that will do everything I'd want it to do. Anything in that bottom row will just sit in. And I feel that's an easy way for me to A, learn something really fast, and B, get the most out of it. There's just enough utility to pull out what I might want. Modulation, mixing, all those sorts of things. And I don't feel like I need anything else. I mean, that's 9U if you count the sort of demo row at the bottom, which is changing all the time. I don't really feel I need much else.
You'll be surprised how little you actually do need. And it's back to that kind of, I suppose, that axiom of it being that as a listener, you need far less than what you think you need as a performer. A performer always thinks that they need, I've got to change this now, the crowd are going to want something different, or the listener's going to want something different. It's like you as a listener just need very little that's actually going on in a piece. There's almost like this complete, different roles that we have for that. But yeah, I mean, you can kind of sketch it out in your head of thinking, I need this really big system, or I need this, and I'll need to change this. And when you do perform with that, I found when I've kind of tried to whittle it down and get it into something really workable, I've ended up thinking, well, actually, I didn't use that at all when I played, so I'm not going to use that again.
Yeah, it's easy to think. Sorry, Logan, go on.
I was going to say something to keep in mind too is the more you have, the more to go wrong.
Yeah.
More potential things to go wrong, like the more gear you have.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a tendency to, I mean, we've all been there, whether it's completely live acoustic music, one person manipulating a device, a DJ, whatever, where something's captured, something emotive within us, and you'd be amazed how static a loop can be once you've caught people's attention.
Yeah.
In that way. And they don't need to do anything.
No, exactly.
You can argue about variation in live performing if it's not electronic, but still, a house or techno loop that literally doesn't do anything for a minute. Plenty of people are happy with that. I'm sure most of us have been. What do you tend to take out, Logan? You take out a few different formats from what I've seen.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what it is that I'm doing. I kind of cross quite a few genres with regards to what I play or perform. So depending on if I'm doing like an ambient soundscape drone type of thing, more limited, say like a Eurorack case, effects, and just try to limit myself and force myself to get into that creative mind of that. Just a limited setup. So I've found, at least with that, I used to perform a lot of kind of ambient stuff with a ton of instruments, and like, just, you got to simplify, you know, keep it simple, and you know, and you know, that person was right, I found. So for the more techno style, you know, performance, I tend to bring quite a few different pieces out. Mostly because, you know, I got a couple of drum machines, 6U Eurorack case. Recently, I've been taking out the Bug brand system. The Vermona DRM1 is always a favorite of mine. It just can't sound bad.
I think I've you tell me if this is wrong, but I think I've found a picture of your Knobcon setup.
That was a performance we did. I did 2 performances at Knobcon. One was kind of official, one was unofficial. We got a bug-out room, which was kind of like a ambient drone type of room where anybody could come in and perform. And so that was Sunday, and I had performed kind of a techno set the night before, so I could tear everything down and simplify the setup. So I just did, I think I had 2 voices on the Bug brand. I manually played the Vermona with the trigger buttons, and I just ran into my 1402, my Mackie 1402, and auxiliary 1 would be the time factor. Space was on auxiliary 2, and just a lot of reverb, a lot of delay. I mean, you can kind of see there's a cable next to the mixer there. I actually just plugged a 1/4-inch cable, jacked the gain, and just ran that into the space, because I always have the running joke that the Eventide space sounds so good you could do an entire ambient album with just a 1/4-inch cable.
Yeah.
So I did just that. I was like, whatever, we'll just run a cable into this and see what happens. And recording of that, I know it was recorded in a room mic, so I'll get that up online at some point.
One thing I've noticed, I tend to do a lot when I'm playing at home, and maybe everyone else can say whether they do it live or otherwise. There's that red banana jack hanging out. Does anyone else, I do it a lot, tend to leave cables hanging even for the day after, so that I know that was something I was plugging in somewhere and doing.
Yeah,
I tend to leave one end plugged in quite a lot.
Yeah, so you know, the modules make great cable holders.
Yeah.
You know, and if we're all designing them right, they're protected, so it should be fine, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. What about you, Radek? You take out different formats and tend to merge multiple formats on one performance.
Yeah, it also depends on the project, really, because it's so diverse that, you know, it depends who I'm working with. If I play with the band, it's different setup. If I'm doing a solo set, it's different, and depends on the type of stuff I'm playing as well. What tends to stay most of the time is Octotrack for me, because of practicality. Again, it's kind of what Robin said. Like, it's so easy to take anywhere. You know, I could take like 2 guitar pedals, but I have Octotrack and I have, you know, all effects I want in there. And sometimes from the PAs, you probably wouldn't hear the difference if it's Octotrack reverb or if it's, you know, Eventide space. You know, it depends on the venue you play, but.
Yeah.
So I find it really useful because you can use it as a mixer, you can use it as an effects box, you can do live sampling in. I kind of have like love-hate relationship with it, but at the end, even if I don't plan to take it, I end up taking it because it's just so convenient.
Yeah.
And I know it pretty well now, so it's, you know, it's easy to do the mutes and stuff, you know, run stuff through it.
So other than the queuing, mixing, live sampling, do you take a bunch of samples, say for a solo set, as opposed to working with someone else, that's almost like your get out of jail free card, that just in case you've got something to fall back on?
Sometimes I have, sometimes I take machine drum for it, for example.
Okay.
So I have some patterns in, and what I like to do is run modular through machine drum. I used to play a lot of set with just machine drum and mono machine before, and then once Octotrack came out, I basically swapped mono machine for Octotrack and loaded it with my mono machine patterns. And then mono machine was only 6 voices, so I still have lots of channels free to put extra stuff. And then I went more into modular, so to have some, which works really nicely with electron boxes that are really quantized to the grid, and you kind of think in those patterns, while modular is more fluid, so it's I really like to bring the two together. Now I'm more switching towards only modular and kind of trying to leave the electrons on the side, or you know, it depends also on the projects. When I was playing like with the dancers, I mentioned before, it was I was just using free UKs and doing like a random, really delicate, really sparse stuff, almost like ambient going through the Octotrack for the effects. But
so,
yeah.
We've certainly spoke about you working with dancers. So was that quite free-form in the music and they were responding to you, or was anything planned out? How did that project work?
Well, the project I'm talking about this was Alain. It was with dancers I did, was 2 years ago, with Marie Ronald Mattison. She's the choreographer I worked with. So basically I composed the whole show, and only one piece was live. Right. So I used small system for it with the Octotrack for effects. Basically it was just free U.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something you've done a lot as well, Robin, working with dancers and live performers. How does that tend to work for you? Is it quite a free-form initial sort of ideas bouncing around?
I'm on my 10th production this year, 10th dance production, and that's from everything from like apparently the world's first VR ballet I just finished, which was actually real music for a real violin player and an orchestra. And that's a very specific thing. You know, this isn't modular, obviously, but I do quite a lot of commission work. That's how I make a living. And it's always interesting because dance is always intriguing, because the conversation begins about somebody being interested in your work. And then there's the duration. And then it's interesting because the first time I ever made anything for dance was 1996, 97. And a French dance company approached me and said, look, we'd be interested in using some of your music for a performance. And I said, that's great, but why don't I write something new for you? Obviously secretly thinking, then you get paid more for it, obviously. You know, just take something from a record. So they said, sure, you know, why don't you come to France? We fly you out and we can have a talk about it. So I was so excited. I had a job, I think, at the time, and I probably took a day sick to fly to France very excitedly. And I got there and I sat with the choreographer and I got my notebook out very nervously. And I said, okay, tell me about the piece. And he said, well, there are 12 dancers. I said, 12 dancers. He said, it is 45 minutes long. Okay, 45 minutes long. And that's all I know. So I flew all the way to France to learn these 2 parts. This is just before email was really popular. And then I came home and I had to write this music. And not much of a structure. Are we talking speed? Are we talking something slow, something very fast? What kind of mood? What kind of texture? So I just wrote music. And I heard nothing back. And in those days, it was when you had to send a DAT tape to somebody. So I sent the DAT tape through some courier company and then heard nothing. And eventually one day I had to nervously telephone them and say, so you got the DAT? And they said, yes. I said, and is it okay? And they said, we love it. Can we have 10 more minutes of music? And that, you know, in that way, that's largely what dance has been like. You know, it's very difficult to voice that conversation. And I've been working with all kinds of independent companies and larger dance companies, and it's a great challenge. But what I love about it particularly is for me, it's about audiences. We can make work can appeal to a certain audience, but dance is extraordinary because it reaches out to a very different audience. And my history of dance is since I was a teenager, I went to see Merce Cunningham's work because John Cage and David Tudor were composing for Merce Cunningham. So you've got this avant-garde choreographer, but I was attending because I was so excited by the music. And then I discovered Michael Clarke, a British choreographer. Michael Clarke was dancing to The Fall and Glenn Branca and all kinds of wild electronic music and Suicide and David Bowie. And when you're 17, 18 years old and you discover somebody in dance is using this music, it's really thrilling. So, you know, what I love about it is you can make a piece of music and suddenly 10,000 people have heard this music, and then it travels without you into different territories. So I've got a piece that's in New York in 2 weeks, and the same night I have 4 different performances, which confuses some people because I have them listed on my website and think I'm actually performing live in 4 different countries at the same time. And I like to be busy, but I can't quite do that at the moment still, you know. VR presence, in fact, this isn't me. My VR presence is somewhere out there, you know, doing another show, so. But yeah, dance is something I work with a lot, and I find it, you know, thoroughly enjoyable, particularly for myself, is because I largely don't perform it live. So I can finally deliver the work, and then I can sit in the audience. I went to one recently in London. It was quite funny, and I sat there in the audience and a little bit nervous before the performance began. And there was an elderly couple sitting behind me, and I could hear them turning through the program, and they said, "Oh, music by Scanner? Didn't he do the music for that other thing we saw?" Well, and I've had to put my fingers in my ears because I thought, I know they're not going to like this. There was a fantastic review in the Times newspaper that said, I would rather have my fingernails pulled out than listen to the first 10 minutes of this performance piece with the score by Scanner. And I thought, what a great review. You know, it really wasn't that bad, but was a great moment.
I always remember, well, not off topic, but off electronic music. I always really liked, I can't remember which Crass album it is. The inside of one of the Crass albums has got, it's all bad reviews. It's just, they all cut up and put inside the album. Yeah. I was always impressed with that.
It's always something to be quite proud of. I had a great one in this, I'm not if everybody knows it, a very conservative British newspaper called the Daily Mail. And I did this dance piece at the Royal Opera House in London. And they didn't only hate the dance. The review finished, and basically they said this dance is totally appalling. And the last sentence said, and by the way, the music was rubbish. And to me, that was so fantastic. I'd like just to have that on a T-shirt, you know. Yeah. Daily Mail, and by the way, the music was rubbish.
So, Robin, do you use Modular a lot when you compose for dance, or like for the sound design for that, or more scored pieces? Yeah,
more recently I have. I mean, you know, as we all know, maybe working with a modular isn't the fastest way of working. So if I have a deadline and I have to deliver something, I can do it so fast in Logic and Ableton Live. I can put this thing together and get a sketch together very fast. But often I can be repeating steps that I'm familiar with, and I put a shape together that is maybe even I get a bit bored by it before I've sent it off. So recently I worked on a piece for Rimbaud Dance in London, which is still touring at the moment. And it's a very big piece with a live orchestra. And that was interesting because the choreographer, Lucy Gurin, an Australian choreographer, and myself had a conversation, and she was interested in a pulse. She said, what I want is something that just is a pulse but keeps changing for 30 minutes. And I thought, well, I could so easily do that in Ableton. I could run all kinds of filters and have this thing going, but it's so unrewarding for me. And then I just set up a patch on the modular. I mean, something so simple, something like Harvestman Piston Honda, literally with a clock going into it, and started producing this pulse. And it was dirty and grinding, put it through a filter, and this thing started coming alive and moving. So I recorded it and sent it over, and she said, this is beautiful. Because what happened then was I developed lots of sketches, and at the end, we had to put them all together. And of course, harmonically, I hadn't tuned anything. So the oscillators weren't necessarily tuned in the same way. So you had this very odd, fluid piece. And then I had to score it for an orchestra. So you have these two things that had to be playback because the piece is touring and it's just not practical for me to travel with it. So the electronics are playing and the orchestra is playing at the same time. Essentially what you have are what I call clouds. So you imagine you have the piece, which is the modular from start to finish doing this and moving through, like it was something like 128 beats per minute going. And this thing would flow its way through. and then the strings would kind of float up and down, so they'd be ever present. So I was thinking it's a little bit like looking at the sky and watching the clouds move across. And the clouds get darker or lighter or more compact or expand, whatever they may be. And so the live instruments kind of move their way through. And it works into this really beautiful piece. I mean, it was such a joy to work with a dozen live musicians in rehearsal and then have them play to this music. And then I spoke to them afterwards because I thought, I wonder what they feel about this. You know, do they really like it? You know, because I discovered afterwards the one thing they really hate, for understandable reasons, is a click track. The thing the musicians did not want was to sit there with this thing going, yeah. And they had to play perfectly in time with this, 128 beats. So the two things basically just exist at the same time, and they float across one another. And in a sense, they meet, but they never really talk to each other. And it's been a great success, and I don't mean that arrogantly. I've been really pleased that actually it's worked so well, so fluidly. And I've done another piece, which is touring at the moment, called Pattern Recognition, with a London-based choreographer called Alexander Whitley. And that is based on artificial intelligence. And it uses a lighting system that learns the movements of the dancers. And so I produce these very, very deep sensual pulses that are filtered almost beyond recognition and then just flower and open out and become really, really percussive and then close in again. And that was really fun to do because, again, that was working with something very, very percussive. And again, it's very easy, in fact, as Logan was saying, to produce these kind of beautiful ambient textures. I mean, I know when somebody once said to me about Modular, they said, reverb is your friend. And it's a great phrase in a way because it is something that, can take something often that can be very harsh on the ear, and it can devour it and move it into this kind of beautiful oceanic sound in a fantastic way. And I think what really appeals in these contexts with the Modular is the way that it does, and I use the word again, offers this fluidity. It offers something that feels organic. And with dance, you're watching movement and bodies flow and echo in real time. So if a music can offer a similar kind of flexibility, can offer a similar kind of change, as if like you start with one weather system and you end up with another weather system, a bit like living in the UK, that, by the end of the 30 minutes or the 45 minutes or however long it may be, you have gone through, to use a cliche term, on a journey. And it's great. I mean, dance is one of those things I really, really love working with. It's such a joy. And, I get to sit there in the audience, and at the end of the premiere, I get to walk on the stage and take a bow, and my work is done. Then I send an invoice. It's great.
Mention absolute vibe killer for musicians. I haven't performed with any Modular, but I have taken out electronics and had to play to a click. Drums is my main instrument, the majority of my live work. And taking an electronic kit, syncing MIDI up through a sound card, playing live MIDI into the sound card, into a laptop with Ableton Live, MIDI syncing to the keyboard player, so all his delays were tempo locked. So I had some movement. If I wanted to nudge something up a couple of BPM one night, I could. Got quite clever with key commands and pedals for switching tempos and things. But I used to have to, and it was sort of electronic pop, a little bit more dancey in some ways as the tempos went up. But it was so loud on stages where we were playing, we'd turn up and there'd be two Pioneer CDJs and a mixer, and they were like, well, we thought you were just DJs because it all sounded that way. And we, again, not arrogant, but we managed to really craft this thing live with real players. But I used to have to put, with the size of the systems, especially the festival stuff, I had to put earplugs in and then headphones over the top with a click. By which point, my interaction with the band was, I might as well have been just a drum machine to press play on. There was a bit more life to it than that, but the constant balance of, well, I'll do one earplug, but both headphones, and I'll see how that goes. And then I'll do two earplugs, and I'll offset one of the headphones up a bit or down a bit. It's horrible.
That reminded me of a great story I heard. A friend of mine, a sound engineer, was working with, I won't say online, I can tell you afterwards, an extremely popular American kind of indie rock band. And their drummer had a click track, and he just could not basically remember the tracks. So the click track was fantastic because it would go, and chorus, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the cues all the way through. And I thought that was tragic, really, being locked in such a way. I mean, you literally are turning into a machine, and that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
certain bits, because we'd produce up, the way we used to work, a little bit off topic, we'd produce up this stuff together and then go, right, well, how are we going to play it? Because there's 16 little glitchy clicks and you've only got 8 pads and maybe another 2 that are free on a bank of 8 pads on like a Roland performance pad or something. So we go, right, well, we're going to have 2 of them on a loop, which is fine because it's 2 a click. But the way that we'd write these fills and me trying to play like probability-based random that we injected into bits of performances, as a player that was always interesting, but we had to write these little loops stopping and starting, sometimes a bar or 2 or 4 bars if I was feeling lazy, usually 2, beforehand, so I could hit this and then play this 2-bar pattern change without having to go over and hit start or stop for section changes. And that, I almost needed that on the thing. I almost needed to go, remember that fill, do it, hit that before you do the fill. Because it's not one of those that you used to as a drummer, you know, you go around the kit and then you go to the crash on the 1 and that's not going to happen because it's got like a 2-bar lead in on Ableton or something. Bringing it back on topic with Modular, similar vein though, has anyone performed with others where you're sharing clock or having to work around something else?
I did it. I've done it a few times, actually. I did a show, actually, back in London last year or 18 months ago, where there were 4 of us. We all played solo sets, and at the end of the night, there was a clock shared. And that was great fun. I mean, obviously, it turns into a party, because as soon as there's a clock and everybody's on the same clock, they keep adding and adding.
That's something I've always wanted to do, that. Like, particularly at the meetups with Ben, is just to, you know, we've never managed to do it, but just to kind of pencil in some time at the end, where like, right, you're the master clock, let's just divide this around the entire room, see what happens, you know.
I know London Modular guys do that. I saw a great show by them at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, which was fantastic, on one of those kind of free Fridays they have where you can go and see exhibitions and visit the museum. And they were set up in one of the grand halls, and it was Simon and the rest of them all basically with 1 clock, pounding away. But what was fantastic, all the audience were either sitting down or just wandering around, clearly just watching what on earth was going on. And to me, that was a great joy again, you know, that you could actually, the audience could engage and lean over and think, what are they using here? How are they making these sounds? And there was just this 1 clock that was filtered out, and you could divide it and do all kinds of things. And I know when we did it in London, it was such fun to do. I mean, really. And it was about, I decided I was going to slow everything down. So whatever clock they sent out, I was going to kind of break it down. So I was going every 16 bars with these kind of whooping sounds.
Yeah.
But it was grand, actually. I mean, really grand.
Did you ever get a feeling of, because obviously with a live band, let's say guitar, bass, drums, if you feel the guitar player's pushing a bit, you know, and the vibe's right on the night, everyone can just lift with them a little bit and ebb and flow, and you get, as you said, a really sort of fluid performance. I used to have it where guitarist or keys player would look at me wanting me to speed up, that, you know, that it really was, you know, it was 125 house music, for example, and the club was really moving and it maybe wanted to be at 128. Which usually meant, you know, tuck the drumstick under the arm, some sort of playing with stuff under my arm, lean over and press the up arrow and try and do, you know, BPM every 4 bars or something so it didn't jack up really off. But I found it quite restrictive because I couldn't, I mean, it's something Richard Devine talked about in the interview. I mentioned that he likes having 1 source that he can just turn up and down, faster, slower, and the whole system changes.
Yeah, it's really nice. I like doing that as well, actually. From
really
like ultra random or something, using as a 1 module.
Yeah, I think that's what Richard used, the ultra random analog, and just
because you can modulate it as well, and it makes really nice. I love doing like wonky clock with it. I use it quite a bit in few patches, basically changing the clock with the pressure points and sending that to ultra random, so you have like kind of clock is divided over 4 steps, and then
I mean, that's it.
Kind of less static.
Yeah, if you've got plenty of things like clock dividers and multipliers, and then you've got 1 master clock from whatever it is, when you turn that down, I just love that, hearing all those divisions or multiplications just either cascade down or up. It's just a great way of just putting a completely different spin on a live experience.
I think also if you use something like pressure points, which is what I was using, it's a way to suddenly offer a very live fluidity to it again. You literally just start spinning things in a way, you know, which are free from the clock in a way. And I think those kind of tools are quite essential for performance for me, that I have something I can physically play. And I can play percussion, I can do very tight kind of bongo sounds if I wander, I can do a very low bass, but I'm free from the clock. You know, I can unplug and just, you know, run it live.
Yeah. That's certainly what I did in the Toronto gig, was that on the system that we just had up on the screen at the beginning. I just had one of the pressure points there. And as what you were saying, Ben, earlier as well, about, say, when you're in a live situation and say like there's like kind of a crescendo piece or something, it just enabled me to be able to either back off or introduce other sounds and add, you know, to go with the flow, with the spontaneity of the other musicians. You've just got that on power, just having this little kind of keyboard. I mean, obviously the great thing about something like Pressure Points or the Synthwork type ones is the fact that it doesn't have to be about pitch. You could be just using it for volume, or you could be using it for, as Radek mentioned, like clock changes. You know, so it's just got this fantastic variety of different things it can actually do within a system.
That's why I actually use things like tap tempo. Like I've got this little Boss pedal, and I use it when I'm playing live, just to the Moog analog delay, so that I can just tap in the kind of, I'm not running a clock, but I'm just doing it by ear. So it's always going to be slightly off. I'm never going to be as tight as a machine. And I like that, because then after a while, these things start to fluctuate and they start playing against one another, which is great, actually.
Yeah. I really like the idea of Pressure Points. I managed to find some analog memory expanders for both, which haven't been made for a while by Make Noise, just so that per step I've got 8 values. And I'm really seeing that as whether it's at home, whether I do take it out live at some point, a full system change. I feel like 8 voltages, well, maybe not in 6U. What's that, Logan?
It's a beautiful thing to have that many to change like that.
Well, yeah, live in 6U, for example, I've taken up half the case with a system changing. So it's probably more suited to the little duck for low-cost tower. But I really like the idea that 8 things will change, or even if it's I quite like playing them live through a sequential switch, so that if I was to tap 1 to 8 across the 2 pressure points, or 1 to 4 across 1, by the time I go back to 1, I'll use the gate output to change through the switch and switch through the values. And I think as a pitch keyboard style interface, even just with 4 pads, set, you know, the 3 rows of 4, set 12 voltages, you almost forget that, say, step 1 is the one that will switch you down onto the next row, taking the individual gate out. And you end up with it makes it, for me, seem really alive. Because, like I said, I forget. Others might not. Others may really intently think, right, I'm going to play this pattern moving between 2 notes, and I'm going to hit step 1 to change through and switch to the next, and moving back and forth. I tend to just forget about it deliberately. I really like that I've got 12 voltages. I'm happy with them. I know they work. They do whatever they're doing, and just interact in that way. It might be that I reach over for one to do a pressure movement and pitch changes, and it makes it, I almost look at the case and think, oh, that's what you're doing. Right, fine, we'll go with that. And just run with it. And I really like that way of working.
What do you think, Ben? Sorry,
No, go on, Matthew.
Yeah, I was going to, obviously you've got it on the screen there, and you've touched on it a little bit. What do you think, again, from a live performance perspective? I really like the idea of these little 1U tiles that you've got there, you know, particularly like all the utility modules that you may want, you know, if you're gearing this towards like a live musician, the fact is that you can have things like Logic or Mults and different things like that are not taking up the main real estate in your actual case. I think those seem to be a good thing. I don't know if there's anyone else, any of you guys out there have got these. I certainly don't have any of them.
No, I don't have any of them, no.
I mean, the little case that I do have, the 6U one that I can't take out, I've modified the top and the bottom of the Dofa case. It just comes with some plywood in the top and the bottom. And I've just put like a row of mults and a mixer and some attenuators. But the one that you've got there, Ben, just seems like, a great idea.
Well, I mean, I'll take you through it. I mean, for live or for the ears video that you can see it in, I almost wanted 2 ears modules for that video. I had a drum machine running in the pocket operator, and with the button masher little arcades, I mean, I pull it up and then I'll get a modular grid. But with the little button, arcade button, the scratch of ears, and then all the utility stuff, it took 54 HP of just ears, the new mutable and music thing module, which is the contact mic, elements, and then the cherry machine and its expander. And it meant that just with ears, I could use the gate that was derived, split it. I could attenuate that into a value in elements. I could use a mult to step through cherry machine values well, still putting audio in element. Just, yeah, absolute mega utility, because the cycle is
that one clock or that one event, if you like, you're getting so much variation with these.
Yeah. I mean, look, I've got a big head, and it's not much bigger than my head. You know,
I think it would make really nice live case because it's really small, so you can easily take it with you.
Yeah. I'm surprised. I mean, you'll probably tell us, Ben, that there are, but I'm surprised case manufacturers haven't brought out more cases like that with the one U at the top and the bottom. I think would be a really good, neat trick. Even if you just filled it with mults effectively, it'd be still really good.
Well, I'll pull the modular grid up there. If it'll zoom in a bit. I mean, look at what you're getting in the font. I've been really sort of singing its praises to people just this week, having used it. I have a spring reverb, a mixer, a cycling slew that can be an LFO, an envelope, or a slew, buffered mult, attenuator offset. I've got a stereo output that patches onto the side of the case with a headphone amp. I've got an oscilloscope from Cylon Labs, which maybe don't help performance, but it sits and looks pretty. It keeps me amused. Button masher, variable noise, which you can take right down for random gates, sample and hold, and a VCA in 2U of 54 HP.
Yeah, that's just incredible.
I mean, not with this particular selection, but I think you could get a lot out of it for performance. I'm sure some of you might be looking at it and thinking, you could do 20 minutes on that. You could get half hour.
Easily.
But the way I see this box is really my little interaction box. Sort of just sit and play live. I mean, it'll be a great one when kids that are in the family come round because they can hit stuff. And I mean, with the ears module, you can hit the side of the case and it picks it up. But I think if I change the module selection ever so slightly, maybe go rings instead of elements, or drums that I can trigger, or a sampler, I think you could get a lot out of it. And it's not big.
That being a solo instrument or something that you would use with another musician or a couple of musicians, you could definitely get a huge amount out of that.
Well, it'd be really nice, I guess, like what you're doing, Radek, with a trumpet player live, using an external contact mic or direct or another microphone in, and then using the resonator and all the utilities to really pull a lot of tones out of something else.
Yes, I use, like right now I'm using machine drum basically to bring stuff in, because then I can resample live, and then use modular on the side as well for like the extra random fluidity.
So that project,
I find, sorry?
I was just going to say that project, for anyone that wants to know, is RPE Duo, which is you and a trumpet player.
Yeah, Matthew Postle. He's in US, so we kind of collaborate between US and Europe. I keep sending him my patches, and then he improvises on trumpet or writes like melody on trumpet, and then sends me back. We're just releasing the album soon, hopefully. So just finishing this up. Yeah,
but I mean, you've done plenty of performances live together when your paths have crossed. What are you taking live from the trumpet? Are you taking a microphone feed in?
Yeah. I take a microphone feed and I send it to Octatrack and then feed to machine drum through the queue out most of the time.
And is that in any way, is that a one-way connection in terms of he's performing and you're processing, or are you feeding him a cue or a click, or is it this sort of
he just listens to the whole mix.
Okay.
So we basically use either the monitors or the PA that is in the venue as our monitors. And then I just process him through machine drum and live sample. So and then make the patterns on the fly out of that. It depends also on the piece, but sometimes I would just process, resample, and then once I have the new loops out of the trumpet playing, he improvises on the top of what we just sampled.
Yeah.
And then we have the structure based on the patterns in machine drum and Octotrack, at least in the past. Right now we kind of play with Buklai at EMS because we did artist residency there. So we kind of revamped the whole aesthetics almost of our duo. We started out while studying in New York, so that's why we kind of played a lot improv stuff, basically. We had the whole set, 45 minutes, based on 5 different motifs, which we were kind of remixing and improvising the order as well. And now it's totally gonna change, so I'm kind of still not sure how we're gonna take it live.
Okay. So do you sync your gear, or are you quite free with all of it? Is it all just on and audio's plugged in, or have you got everything in sync and you see yourself sort of manipulating a big system of stuff?
I have Modular is not synced, at least until recently. I have basically machine drum and Octotrack synced via MIDI, and each track is basically 2 patterns that are matching, that I improvise with, and then create the new stuff on the fly while resampling. And then if I have Modular, I was playing with Serge. So if I don't have live musicians with me, because like I have another project called Space Fight, which I play with the visual artists as well, and there's more musicians, but the concept is kind of similar to RPE Duo. That's kind of improvised, and we go from pattern to pattern. But I also use Serge for that. So if I play solo sets, I kind of take that approach, but have like a live improvising machine, which I kind of interact with, and then feed, resample, and then make the patterns out of that as well.
Yeah. So we're all very, very, very free and loose in our take on it. Logan, you mentioned doing ambient and techno type stuff. I'm seeing if one of us does this. Are you really syncing up things heavily? Is any of the sort of techno that you're doing in any way pre-prepared? Any initial drum patterns to kick things off?
Are you talking to me? Sorry, there's a glitch.
Yeah, I was just saying everyone's quite free in their approach, and you talked us through your ambient set at Nobcon, which was like that. For the techno stuff, I'd imagine, maybe not, you having to be really rigid with getting everything in sync and possibly having some patterns to kick you off live. How do you approach a techno set, for example?
The techno stuff, I tend to have using the BeatStep Pro.
Yep.
Favorite sequencer to use live, but it can get a lot done. The MIDI sync isn't perfect, but basically what I end up using, for instance, in my last couple of shows, I'll use the top 8 pads on the drum sequencer portion of it to sequence MIDI notes. I have the 8 trigger outputs. I've run into some problems with them on the BeatStep Pro, but for outputs, I use those as like programmable clocks for the modular.
Oh, we've lost you.
Oops.
No.
We were doing quite well. There you go, Logan, you're back. You just said you use the BeatStep triggers as programmable clocks.
Clocks, yeah. For, say, like to advance my sequencers, I've got 2 of the Sputnik programmers. So I'll advance those with 2 different trigger clocks, and at the same time, trigger 2 different envelope generators. And so basically everything gets sequenced, if you will, on the BeatStep Pro with regards to clock and triggering and whatnot. I try to do as little CV sequencing on the BeatStep Pro as possible, just because it's quick to edit in real time live, but not as fast as just like, you know, changing a knob on a programmer sequencer.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically my main clock comes from the BeatStep Pro. I'll feed MIDI clock into of the BeatStep Pro into, say, like the Ramona, and then use the MIDI through on the Ramona into my Roland TR8. So that kind of, because you got to have kind of like the classic sounds for the techno stuff. But yeah, so basically everything is centralized on the BeatStep Pro, and I've had that crash in the middle of a set, which is kind of interesting, where it's like, well, I'm back on. But usually, because of how I've got it set up, it starts up pretty quick. As far as getting things back on track. But the couple, I mean, I'll do like 6 drum patterns for a show if I'm like really prepared. I'm guilty of kind of being the guy who sets up the gear like the night before, and just like, all right, cool, this is what I'm gonna do. But for the most part, it's all improvised.
Yeah. So you setting those clocks up? Sorry. So by you setting those clocks up, the sort of rigid rhythm of techno, once you're in sync, do you feel quite free with everything else in terms of bass line?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because everything is like I said, the programmer sequencers, they're just running as they, and I can change the parameters similar to like on pressure points. And each of those rows, I just, you know, those parameters to whatever it is that they're modulating. And I can change things up pretty quick, especially if I'm using like, on my Eurorack case, I typically use like the braids, mutable braids. And so like with that, you can get, you know, sound changes like, or voice changing pretty quickly. Right now, my 2 main oscillators actually in my Eurorack case are the braids, the E950 from Synth Technology. So you get some pretty drastic voice changing from that, which allows me to kind of get away with a lot with very little, at least in the Eurorack case.
Yeah. Well, a lot of house and techno is tonal change. It's not, you know, you don't need several variations of melodic themes that go through varying changes for that style. You mentioned an interesting point I wanted to touch on, gear failures. I'll kick it off with a non-modular one with the taking the electronic kit and all the MIDI out. Because it was pre-SSD, the laptop I was using, and the subs on certain stages, again, it was always the bigger festival ones, would shake the hard drive in the laptop, and it shook the hard drive, and the audio buffer went, and it went out of sync by an 1/8 note. So nothing I was changing was particularly that important in terms of starting and stopping loops, but they'd always be out by an 1/8 note, or at one point it was a 1/4 note out at a certain gig. So I was just getting these evil looks from the keyboard player all the way through, as if I just wasn't on it, like I couldn't play the pattern, and it was, oh shit, I should have stopped. And then you hit the thing too late. Because this was pre-deciding we need to set a key on the laptop that just stops everything. We can't rely on, oh, well, Ben's missed his cue, and that's not going to stop for 2 bars, so we'll all just sit and wait for the loop to finish, even though it's done playing. So that's probably been my worst one. That and just dropouts from subs shaking a stage, to the point where a lot of this stuff was quite heavy dance, so we'd set the velocity on the bass drum pedal fairly low, so it was just pumping all the time. There wasn't too much like a full natural drum kit variation on the bass drum. But I remember really softly just feathering this bass drum pedal because I was so scared that it was going to go, and it continually through that set it went. I think that was one, again, Richard Devine said he had, and it just completely equivalent blue screen of death and just stuck on one particular bit in the audio buffer. Any horror stories from anyone?
I have the worst for me was when the DI boxes went. I was on tour with RPE Duo, actually, with Matt. We played a show in Asheville, and I was using headphones as my monitors, and I was like really going heavy. And suddenly I feel like someone touched me here, and it's like I was like, what's going on? And there's like no sound. I was like, oh God.
You've really been hammering it.
Yeah, I was, because like everything was working fine on my end. I was like really going into it, and then Matt was like, oh, hold on. It's like the worst thing. And the other one I had was one of the Electron meetups. My MIDI sync cable, which was syncing mono machine and machine drum, went, and I was totally going out of sync. I was kind of have to play it both play buttons of the each time I was change the pattern. But people really loved the set. I was just getting annoyed because it sounded slightly different than what I intended originally, or when like when I usually heard these patterns when they were in sync normally, Anyway. Yeah, these are.
I'm actually at the moment. I've got all the notes for writing a book about failures in terms of my own career, and really about all the not to tell them on air now. I mean, really, some of the terrible things that have happened. I mean, on a technical level, I've done everything from I was booked to headline a show in Buffalo, upstate New York, in the early '90s, and I was using at the time this quasi-MIDI quasar synth, if you know it. It's a kind of a techno style thing, and I had a Roland JV1080. And I travel with an S1000 sampler. I still cannot believe I travel with all this stuff. There we are complaining about 6U, or, that's enough.
Yeah.
I travel with all this stuff, and I got all the way. It was my first kind of big show in the US, forgetting that there's a power difference. And obviously the power wasn't enough. I had no transformer. So absolutely nothing worked. None of the technology. It was really awful. But I happened to have, and I don't know why, a DAT tape of my work with, just tracks, one track after another. So I played the show with a borrowed DAT machine with all the gear set up and mimed the whole thing. So awful. I'm pretending I'm really into this thing. And it was a kind of techno, it was the heady days of kind of electronic British music, sort of early 90s when Warp Records were first kicking off. And it was quite cultish, all these, great enthusiastic American fans. I felt so wrong. I thought I'm such a lie. I'm having to act on stage. But I've had so many terrible failures. I mean, things that have been my own fault like that, or things simply not working, things suddenly crashing or whatever it may be. I mean, there are too many to tell, but actually next year I'm anticipating publishing this book to really reveal all the hideous truth, the hideous pain that maybe it's almost like a psychiatrist book. I need to get this stuff out there, get it out my system, because it's too embarrassing probably to say on air, actually. So it's easier to read it down.
Can you subtitle it "and the music was rubbish"?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Dear failures and the music was rubbish.
Yeah, it's funny though, because that is the risk of anything. It doesn't matter whether you're in a guitar band or, I mean, I've got a project based on the music of Joy Division, which is with an orchestra called Heritage Orchestra, and that's with 45 live musicians and 3 live singers and a live rock band, drums, bass, and myself with electronics. And I am the engine that drives the show. So we played shows. We did a British tour a couple of years ago, and there were 2,000 to 3,000 people coming along each night to the show. And I cannot tell you how terrified I was, because in a rehearsal, I'm running Ableton Live. So I'm running different sequences. You just hit the pause button and it stops. Or you do something and the whole show stops. And it's that terrifying thing when you're working. You're just so nervous you're going to accidentally lean forward, almost just force yourself to hit the pause button to stop it, to see what happens. It never happened. But in rehearsal, those kind of things would happen, of course. So I think it's the nature of embracing technology, any type of technology. You can be a pianist and the microphone will fall over.
Exactly.
Yeah, strings can break.
Things that go wrong.
Yeah, strings can break, drum skins.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Stick flies off out of a drummer's hand.
Yeah.
Any more gear failures, Logan, other than MIDI sync issues?
Yeah, I had, other than like the beat step just dying on me in the middle of a show one time. I mean, that was, I think the more catastrophic the actual hardware failure is, at least I've been pretty fortunate with this. Like, if something goes really wrong where all of a sudden the music just stops and it's not like the sound, whoever's running sound that night, it's not their fault, failed. I feel like the audience, like...
Oh, we've lost you again.
Oh, what a dramatic pause.
Well, and they go nuts. They usually love it. They're like, yeah, you know, like. So it's. I feel like I've gotten pretty fortunate with that, where it's like at least they understand that. Well, something just happened pretty bad, but get it back going quickly, then you're pretty much safe. I've found, but yeah, trying to do like if you run into sync issues, it's like. You got to time that, you know, your start stop like in time with the music, so maybe people won't actually hear it.
Yeah,
a few times.
I think crowds seem to love it when there's a loud noise. If it's a failure and it goes to silence, it's maybe not as good. But if there's a failure where an amp screams with feedback, it seems to just fill people with so much energy, almost like you've done it deliberately.
It's a great way to get the audience on your side, isn't it? There's so many shows I've been to of others and everything collapses, but then when it comes back together, everyone is, yes! It's a good trick, I suppose. If everything's going really badly, make it fail and you'll win everybody over.
I've had some, I used to perform with Nintendo Game Boys, like running Little Sound DJ, and quite a while ago now, but sometimes they would crash. You're usually running these things, at least how I would program it is on SP1200 or something. Like you only get like 16th notes, but if you want 32nd notes, you have to run twice as fast, which tends to bog down the processor of the Game Boy. So when it crashes, occasionally it would just like...
Do what Logan's feet.
Just talk about crashes.
Great when it happens. I mean, it sucks. It's unfortunate because you have to. I mean, you have to power down, power on. You get the.
No.
Oh, we're not getting the tail, Logan. It's cutting in and out. We need the reverb's your friend, don't we? We all need that 60-second lexicon reverb. You could just stamp on and just let that wash.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Glitches out, but I mean, at least with the Game Boy, you get the fun thing of when you turn it on, you get that classic Game Boy startup sound, and people just eat that up.
Yeah. I was just to say, I wanted to ask the question. I mean, obviously, there's 3 people here that use beat steps, and they've just mentioned, Logan's mentioned, like the, you know, issues that they've had with that. I know Greg uses one in the studio, and you do, Ben. I just want to ask the question of anyone else: what sequencer, if any, they like using live within the modular realm, as it were?
I was using a Stillstone Hammer recently on the Leeds meetup, and I really liked it.
Yeah,
it's really playable. Maybe it's a bit like Electron, so I'm kind of familiar with this kind of workflow.
I see.
Because you have the mutes, everything is quantized. You have 4 tracks, but you can set them on different lengths. So it's really like brought my system together, and both in the studio and once I took it live. I just ran like couple of patterns, but you can easily change the like the division on them and change the length of the each track, and that makes the totally different feel of the patch.
So that was really easy to do in a live situation, was that?
Yeah. I found it really easy. Actually, I was kind of as a preparation for the set. I made the whole album using just one patch, and it was I find like it was so different. It was different enough basically to justify different tracks basically, and you know, it's difficult to say if it was the same track as any other, you know, with just playing with one patch using that sequencer. Right. I really enjoyed it.
So was that a case of you were familiar with button presses and moving in and out? You said it's like Electron, or was it the fact it's a lot of sliders that was playable, or both? You think that lends to being live?
I think a bit of both.
Okay.
You can easily change the sliders, or you can change the patterns really easily as well.
Yeah.
Or like divisions. I didn't change like the melodic content of the patterns much. Actually, that was my kind of. I had the Metropolis before that, and I found it too similar because I couldn't store the patterns, and I would have to change the melody, but it doesn't always work for me, at least in my workflow. I like the Stillstone Hammer because I can store the pattern, change the pattern to the new one, mute the tracks, unmute the tracks. So it's really playable for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it does in a live situation. I mean, I've looked at it, I've seen your sort of setup, but it does look like a really good performance sequencer, as it were.
It's really hands-on, so I really enjoyed using that. But Phil was using the ER101. I wonder if any one of you guys used that.
No, I bought this.
OD devices.
I bought this for the potential of live shows, actually, to take it out.
Yeah.
Right, I haven't actually had much chance to play with it, but I mean, I did one quick test, and when it arrived, and it's one of those things, as we all know, as Greg will testify, you pick up lots of stuff, and it's the different learning curves one has. But it's I've been playing with the synth they made, which has been quite fantastic. The Fenor, or however one says it, and Carbon looks like it's a very powerful thing, and because it took it out the rack, that was quite appealing as well. It meant I could actually put more stuff in the case. Before this, I was also using Metropolis, actually, and I found Metropolis very engaging for live. I wasn't doing techno stuff, but it meant I could suddenly bring in sort of weird little harmonies, or just reduce it to one note and have them hovering in a kind of Steve Reich minimalist music way. And that for me was very, very useful, actually. But this is like a new toy at the moment, which I haven't had a chance to play with.
So what is it? Is it sequencer?
It's a sequencer. It allows you to put lots of patterns in, lots of scenes. I'm not sure how well you can see it here.
I'll pull an image up.
Oh, yeah, true.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks like the Electron. When you look at the buttons, you can easily think it's an Electron machine.
Yeah, we met them in Berlin at the Super Booth, and we had a demo of it there, and it seemed like a really excellent piece of equipment for a live situation.
Yeah, and the synth. I mean, I'm thinking of taking the synth as actually, because it's such a powerful thing. It has a kind of Buchla edge to it. It has this kind of warped, rubbery, textural sound that I really love. And I like the fact, as often with these things, it's one small device.
Yeah.
I like the idea of being able to travel with this when I'm away for a weekend trip, just to play with it. You know? And this was a similar idea. I thought I could just travel with this and actually, a couple of modules and just have real fun with it. But actually, as I say, again, it's a learning curve. Like lots of these things, something like Metropolis is very immediate. It's very hands-on. You're there immediately running these things through. This is about preparing things beforehand a lot of the time, and for much of my practice, and I use the word repeatedly, it's about a fluidity. It's about me responding to a live situation and improvising quite a lot, whereas this obviously would lock it in a way. The one thing that would be interesting is I make tracks, and I put some of them online, and people like them, and I think I dread the day when people actually want to hear things off records or off releases, because I can't repeat them. And Modular particularly is like that. And to me, that's a real beauty of it. I mean, in a way, it captures the essence of our conversation here, which is that it's about the moment. And to me, music is something that's so important. It's a very shared medium. It goes beyond a lot of visual art, say, and literature. You can read a book, but you're not sharing that with lots of people at the same time. Whereas music is something, whether it's 10 people, whether it's 100 people, 1,000 or 10,000 people, are often sharing this moment in real time. And there's a great power there. I mean, a huge power. And to me, that's something that still really appeals about the art form of music. And taking risks within that, I think, is very, very exciting and challenging and dangerous. But it depends what kind of work you do. It's something that I think we mentioned this last week, we had a little chat last week, and there was a time when people started using laptops on stage. And a lot of people said, well, aren't they just playing things back? And lots of people were and continue to do so, which is perfectly fine if that's what one wants. And you want to play these tracks back as they were made. Equally, you can kind of do it with a modular if you wanted to. You could maintain all your sequences. You could make sure that the patch never changes your setup and go through a series of tracks that people really love. For some people, that works extremely well. It sounds like for many of us here, it's not the kind of flow that we're following. It's not the kind of direction. I mean, Matthew, when you were there for 6 hours, you weren't playing tracks. You prepared. You weren't. No, not at all.
But I was just going to say from my particular experience of that venue as well, I was using the newer version of the Turing machine, and I found that an excellent perfect little sequencer to put into a small case that allowed you to have the improvisational aspect of it, because of maybe people who don't know about it, it can be as a random sequencer, but then you can also lock in little sequences and grooves that you think, oh, this is great, and then you can just capture that. And then that, in conjunction with the pressure points, allowed me to transpose that sequence. So that was kind of like more than enough for me from a melody generation machine in a live environment. I thought worked really well. I don't know if anyone else has had experience using that.
Turing machine is fantastic. I was using that in Leeds as well, actually. More to trigger envelopes and stuff. I used it with pulses, which is really useful because you just get extra outputs for gates. I also use it more in the studio. I use it with Brain Seed. It's really cool because it allows you to save like the pattern that you kind of locked, and then you can unlock and then look for another one. So you can kind of make 2 tracks out of that.
That's interesting. Steve, that synth patcher that was on episode 3 or 4, it was on the show a while back. He uses the Stilson hammer that way because it will record TV. So although you can lock the Turing machine, it's gone the day after when you turn the system on again. So that's his sort of musical theme, melody, bassline generator that he might lock and jam on, and then I guess when it's good enough, save it, or when it's one that he's taken to, save it in the Stilson hammer, play around again. It plays into what I was going to say it eats a lot of space, but like Logan said with the Sputnik sequences that are all just analog sequencing, just knobs, no screen, no menu. I think that and a quantizer that you can play, such as the Sonic Potions, Penrose, ADAC 207, Microscale from IntelliGel. If you can set and restrict the notes to a basic minor chord or just octaves or fifths or something, I think if you can restrict its output with a quantizer, you can't really go wrong. Yeah. You're just looking at a row of knobs and going, well, I want step 7 to be a bit higher. It can't be that bad if you set some restrictions on the quantizer.
Yeah.
But it eats a lot of space, having one or multiple 16-step slider or sequences.
Yeah, I just want to touch on that, just from what people have used in a live performance that has actually worked. I know you mentioned earlier, Ben, of like failures, but what's actually been good. You think, oh, right, that's really worked as a sequencer.
What's
Logan?
There's Logan. Sputnik. That's what exactly that Penrose and a step sequencer. Yeah,
I've got 2 setups exactly like that, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that as in the Turing machine as well, I absolutely love for that reason. Again, if you're restricting the output with a quantizer, it really doesn't matter what it's spitting out because you've set a restriction and a set of terms that this thing has to work with as a patch.
Happy accidents.
Yeah. And I think it still leads to interesting and varying things you wouldn't think of. You're maybe just ensuring that
done on purpose, of course.
Yeah, well, you can force those accidents out. And I think with the beauty with the quantizer and the step thing is you can say, well, I don't want a B and a B flat or a D and an E flat. Just set 2 or 3 notes or a full scale you like, and just run with it. I really like that. I mean, you've got the perfect example of that sort of thinking, the TKB behind you.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I kind of use.
Just reaching over and thinking, I wish step 6, 7, and 8 all went up a bit, and just reach over and do it. It's going to do something. Do you run just a off-topic question before we round up? Quantizers in surge format, is that much of a thing? My knowledge of surges.
There's not many of them.
Are they things that have
one official, like the STS quantizer, I can't stand, quite honestly. So I've been using like my Lunchbox programmer. I put in a little Barton simple quantizer into it.
Yeah.
I do hope to do like a conversion pan.
But we've lost you again, Logan. That's what I was going to say. There's a case of
quantizer.
You've gone. We missed all that. I was just going to say what you said, though, the bit we did catch, that it seems to be other DIY circuits just adapted for the format, like the Barton things.
Yeah, I've not used any with it or felt the need to do, but I only ever use that on its own anyway. So it's not I'm not kind of syncing it with other gear, and it's quite nice to be completely, throw your shoes off and be free with that kind of system, really. And that's what I like about it. I don't like constraining it with quantizers.
I feel kind of.
I have a couple of quantizers, but I just like letting that be as free as possible.
So I feel the same with mine as well. I have Swamp, which is basically half of TKB, and you have extra logic and dividers, and it's a bit, it's just different functionality, but there's no quantizer. But I didn't feel a need either for one. Just tune it as I like, basically.
Yeah.
So it looks like Logan's on a gear hunt. Question for you both: would you stand in front of an audience? I'm presuming the answer is yes, in kind of a brave, well, let's accept it and see where it goes kind of way. But would you stand with a TKB and live turn the knobs to manipulate sequences? Would you be quite happy?
Yeah,
I do that every performance.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it doesn't always have to be, the keyboard doesn't have to be for pitch. So,
yeah, exactly.
It could be for any
modulation of the filter or whatever, changing the timing of the patch and so on.
There's only so far, though, that I completely agree, and I like using pressure points like that for tonal and animation changes of a patch. But there's only so far you can go on a single drone-in note, or am I going to shoot me down and say?
Well, no, again, it's entirely up to the individual. But that's the real, like I mentioned before. That's for me. That's like, it's the freeness of the format that I like about that. It's almost, I think, in a way. I mean, well, it's up to the individual, but personally for me, it's kind of like missing the point trying to put a quantizer on that. It's like trying to rein in some wild horse when really you just want to kind of gallop away with it and let it do its thing,
Yeah, I mean, as a drone, it could be one thing and there's lots of changes. I guess what I'm getting at is, for you, live especially, to keep it on topic, but would you be happy with one of those notes in a maybe just general ticking along sequence that just grates and catches on the ear? I mean, you may want to do that intentionally, but do you feel that's a risk at all if you're doing that sort of performance?
Well, no, it's embracing that format. I know that's the kind of thing, and that's the territory that you're leading into. So it's to be expected for me, I guess. But yeah, you just ride it. You just go with it, I think.
Yeah, just go creative with that.
Okay.
Surge is all about bum notes.
Was it Dave Navarro or someone like that used to play with the Chili Peppers that said, and it was completely wrong, a Guitar Magazine published this quote that was pretty ridiculous, that said, different modes of the scale are just playing a wrong note and then playing it again so people think that's what you meant to do.
Oh, yeah. Well, I always I don't know if Logan will have seen this, but there was a great spoof TV show a few years back called Look Around You. And they had a great sort of synth demonstration bit on that. And the guy playing the synth said, they said, what key is this in? He goes, oh, it's in the key of S. And that's what I always kind of say to people when they ask me, what key is this in? I always say it's in S. Maybe S for Surge, I don't know.
There's a definite thing about intention, though. And I think that we've had this discussion either on or off air, I can't remember, about what makes something not just modular bleeps and loops. I think it's the outcome of the audio is maybe not any different to just say sending a sample and hold to something and firing off lots of random. But I think a lot of it comes down to intention and intent, which probably plays into that idea of non-quantized pitch, embracing it. And
it's only a mistake if you let on. I think it's only a mistake if you look like you made a mistake. It's about your body language in performing. Like if you did something whatever, like just keep going and not like look like, oh no, what did I do? Like, it was intentional as far as anybody's concerned. It's all about body language, I've found.
Yeah, well, that's a nice bit to end off for the format. There's going to be some accidents. Happy accidents, probably.
Yeah.
So, but
you don't also have to play melodic, like particularly melodic stuff with it. You know?
Yeah, it could just be percussion. It could be drones. It could be anything. Is there anything anyone wants to mention or things we've missed to go over?
Well, I was just going to say, if we are just, well, not ending on Surge, but I suppose, I mean, this could be a whole other topic in itself. What, I guess, from a live performance perspective, and we're talking about, say, size and things that you can maybe fit on an aeroplane or take out in a bag to do a gig, a Surge panel is almost kind of like made for that. You know, there's the way that that sort of Surge paradigm, that design of multiple blocks can do many different things, as opposed to maybe a Euro module will do one thing. In a way that, like, Surge really does lend itself to a kind of a live environment. I know Radek's gigged many times with one Surge panel. And how have you found that with that kind of, again, the name Swiss Army knife comes up a lot with kind of Surge, but you can kind of do a lot with one panel. Whereas, see, if you were trying to pack that functionality in from a Euro perspective, you'd end up with quite a large case.
Yeah, I think also the 4U size is really nice. I really like the format.
Me too.
Kind of, it's not only like the width, but, you know, like the height of the panel. It's perfect. And it's I agree.
Modular format.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know with the Surge, I agree. You can easily take it like to the desert island kind of thing and do a lot of things with just one, like one panel.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of that has surely got to be that they're sold as panels, like mini instruments or parts of an instrument.
Yeah, that could be something to it. But certainly that paradigm of it being, rather than one function, one module, it's multi-dimensional, if you like, with how the modules are approached. It is a completely different way of doing things, but certainly, yeah, it could be a whole other subject to talk about with that, of how, again, it's not better or worse, but it's just the fact that you can pack a lot more into that particular size as, you know, as an exploration for doing something in a live way.
You've quite seamlessly, and we'll blend the shows together and create a 5-hour mega upload. Lent on to the next show that we're planning on aesthetics, which is that exactly in it, format, size. I have to admit, from my limited time playing a Surge, 4U does feel really nice.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but Radek and I have talked sort of off camera, as it were, in the past about this, about how we think it's, personally, the magic size is 4U, I think. You know, if I had to be super, as much as I absolutely love, you know, Euro, there's plenty of it behind me, and like, obviously, Robin's got an amazing system there. I just find it's just that little bit too small. But I do, you know, I think 5U, you know, it's like the Goldilocks thing. 5U, it's a little bit too big, but it's just like that magic format size.
With Euro, though, in defense of Euro, and we'll get into this, I don't want to go. It's the next show, essentially. Yeah. It's about the design of the module, surely.
Yeah.
Because Surge, as well as being that 1U bigger, is designed with certain spacing in mind. Euro, if someone wants to cram 8 knobs in, you know, those mini pot knobs in 6 HP.
Exactly.
So,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
You do have bigger, wider, more ample designs in Euro as well.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's it. Yeah, you look at some of the Sputnik ones; they're quite, you know, they take like the one that you have behind you, like the musical instrument elements. That's quite a big module, but you've got, like, you feel like you have a freedom to be able to move around it. But I just like with Surge, it's kind of, it's a fixed size, everything's a fixed distance. Yeah,
also banana jack.
Euro. Buy Surge, everyone.
Also, the fact that it has banana jacks, they are really like made to be stackable as well. No?
Yeah.
What's that one? Logan, what was that one? Just
Yeah.
before
Flash was
that's
that
the
one.
Lunchbox
Oh yeah,
programmer.
perfect. Very nice.
It is perfect, isn't it?
Right. Well, we're gonna end up with the 5-hour mega thing, and then we'll end on something else, and it'll.
No, so, yeah, I didn't want to take that much off it.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's been a bit of a unplanned brain dump of our minds about performing and modular. But no, it's great. Anyone wants anyone to check out? Web links or anything like that? Upcoming performances? Anything happening later this year? No,
None of us are doing anything.
no, none of us are doing anything. We've all retired. We'll put links in to all the guests in the description and things you can check out.
I have a couple of shows coming. One in Poland and one in Leeds in November.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can put that. I can put these in the links. I can send you the details.
So
we
Poland,
got the Synth Fest thing happening, haven't we, as well?
yeah, this would probably be up after. Well, definitely be up after Synfest.
Yeah.
But yeah, Synfest in the UK is coming up 1st of October. There's then Ross Lamond from Lamond Design that made the nice big beautiful case behind Robin. On the 12th of November, I believe. Radek playing live in November in Leeds, England. When are you in Poland, Radek? What month?
In a couple of weeks, like during the Synfest. So unfortunately I will miss the Synfest.
All right. Well, be upset that if you live in Poland, you've missed Radek if you don't look at his stuff elsewhere. Anything in the States coming up, Logan? Any related stuff?
If anybody happens to be in Minneapolis, Minnesota, Paul Birkin and myself will be playing on the 17th of November at a small venue, but it should be a fun show. I'm sure we'll record it somehow and get it on the internet. That's kind of best. So.
Yeah, and as the only modular maker on the panel, have you got new modules coming? New login stuff?
I've got a lot of prototypes, nothing that I can talk about too much yet. It's been a lot of catch up with recently, but hopefully this fall I'll have some new stuff that I can announce.
Ah, cool. We're always fixing lots of other gear. I keep thinking you've got the Euro stuff coming, but then I see an ARP in bits or the new cushion stuff.
It keeps me. I mean, it's fun, but it's a huge distraction from actually manufacturing. So but it's not efficient. Let's put it that way.
Right.
No, that's fair enough. I imagine the repair world for Sims isn't. Yeah, cool. All right. Well, subscribe, all the usual stuff. We'll get links on screen and in the description. And cheers, everyone, for coming on. We'll see you soon.
Great.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Cheers.